When you ask for money, you get advice. When you ask for advice, you get money. So the this is practice for me is when I was doing my research interviews, reaching out to centers of influence. I was only asking for advice. I was letting people share with me what their feedback was, and those conversations have led me to other connections. Whereas if I was reaching out to somebody and said, "Hey, I'm going to be doing this virtual reality event startup, and I want you to either invest in me or give me some money," that really channels how the person that you're talking to thinks about their role in it.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of the Inventive Journey. I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that's grown several startups into 7- and 8-figure businesses, as well as the CEO and founder of Miller IP Law, where we help startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. And if you ever need help with either your patents or your trademarks, feel free to reach out to us. Just go to strategymeeting.com. Now, for all of you that are listeners, we've got another great podcast on, and Drew Stone is going to be on. And just to give you a quick intro into his background, so he's been involved with virtual reality or VR, depending on whether or not you refer to it, since about 2014, and been working on startup content distribution network, if I said that right. And it really came along with a friend. I think what you got introduced with it, and I'll probably slaughtered you. You can correct me where I'm wrong. Is to a friend recommended a VR, I think, hackathon, and kind of got engaged via that venue, fell in love with it, loved it, and then kind of back and forth between startups and Microsoft and software as a service. And then towards the end of 2019, came on with Microsoft, did some things with VR, and then decided to lead to where you're at today with branching out and pursuing it how you'd like and getting things going. So with that much as an introduction, and hopefully it does it a little bit of justice, welcome on to the podcast, Drew.
Right on. Thank you so much. Glad to be here, Devin.
So I gave a bit of an introduction, but maybe let's go back a bit in your journey and tell us where things started and how you got to, and walk through how you got to where you're at today.
Right on. Well, thanks again for the introduction. I've always been a collaborator. Actually, as a kid growing up, I always wanted to be an artist. I'm really fortunate to grow up in an arts-rich family. But as an entrepreneur, adults would ask me, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And I would say, "I want to be an artist." And then when they were done laughing, they'd say, "No, what are you going to do for money?" And so it was always it hurt me a little bit. So actually I stopped telling people I wanted to be an artist, but I kept on being an artist. Actually, my grandma got me a shirt that said, "Art is not what you see, but it's what you help others to see." And actually that's, I think, what I'm really kind of helps propel me into doing virtual reality. But yeah, so I've always been like a collaborator, and always taking care of people. I'm the eldest of 18 grandchildren, so I was always the de facto babysitter and keeping everyone entertained. And that has really, I guess, helped set me up for doing events and productions to bring people together and make sure everyone's having a good time. But as you mentioned before, it was 2014 when I first got involved in VR. I was trying to figure out what to do for monetizing. I was working for a startup at the time that was doing a content distribution, as you were saying. And I said, "Hey, man, I really think that there's something here with this VR thing." And they said, "Okay, go figure out how to make money with VR." And so, man, it was still really early days in VR. So I asked a friend of mine, I said, "And what does this look like? How do people make money in VR?" And he said, "Oh, Drew, the guy's name is Ryan Boudinot. A talented writer and working on another really cool startup right now." But anyway, he said, "Drew, you have to just go and experience it for yourself. I won't be able to explain it to you." So that really piqued my interest. And I've done, hackathons and startup weekends before, but I had never done VR. I call myself less technical, where, I could write a program out on paper, but I never remember my syntaxes. So I show up at this VR hackathon. And it was the fourth Seattle VR hackathon. And I listened to a bunch of pitches. And then there was one that's just kind of like caught my eye. It was about helping people after a disaster. So, so I walked over to the person. I said, "Hey, I'm interested in your idea." And then a couple of other people came by, and so I started reiterating the idea and kind of like forming it together as a group would come. And I end up being the project manager for that group, and
Mm.
and we won. We won the best humanitarian category for a project that was called Disaster Cons, where
Mm.
people would wear the Microsoft HoloLens, and they would go in and they would mark different areas where there was
Mm.
damage or fire risk, and then that was supposed to be sent out to incident command. So so our MVP, it worked, and that was really pretty cool. But
Mm.
that really just energized me about VR, seeing how people would come together and collaborate to build something new. And that was the energy was really infectious to me. So I
Mm.
started showing up at my local VR meetups, and before long I was invited to be a co-organizer of the meetup. And then the
Mm.
person who started it switched jobs and moved to California and said, "Drew, here you go. The East Side VR meetup is yours." And so
Mm.
that was great for me. I love bringing people in and you know, like hearing their stories, what their personal work is with VR, and we do a demo and a presentation. And so that's how I started to feed myself with community in
Mm.
VR. And then also, as you mentioned, at the end of 2019,
Well, before
I
we jump into 2000,
oh
and we absolutely will, but so you're going along 2014, you kind of get introduced to it, do the hackathon, you know, win some competitions. Now, is this your full-time gig, making money at it? Is this a side hobby? Is it interest? Do you see that it's going somewhere, or kind of how does that overlay with making a living, so to speak, when people are saying, "How are you going to make money at that?" You know, kind of
right.
how does that play in with things?
How to make money in VR has been a question as old as VR.
Mm.
But so I didn't really think that I was going to be able to. Well, not that I really considered it. It's just hard work, and there's like a small percentage of people that spend their time and energy on VR that are
Mm.
able to make a living off of it. So I think that there's kind of three options now. One is you like get into like a large company
Mm.
like Facebook or Oculus or something like that, or you decide to work on a small project as part of a contract for a small team or something
Mm.
else. Or you go into business for yourself and build the type of future that you want to see. So that's kind of like where I am now, but I didn't really know that I was going to get here by this way. I
Mm.
think that it's just by getting in and paying dues.
Mm.
It was because I had met Ryan and we had a good rapport that he recommended that I go to the VR hackathon. And
Mm.
then it was my work in the community that helped me be taken on to the East Side VR meetup. And then I
Mm.
took that over. I was also invited by the creators of SakuraCon, which is the largest anime convention on the West Coast. It takes place up in Seattle.
Mm.
And I got on a phone call with them and they said, "Hey, Drew, we want to do VR in SakuraCon." And I said, "Okay, well, you're going to, you know, you have to have this and you have to have one of these and make sure you have sanitation." And I
Mm.
got through this long litany of stuff and they said, "No, we want you to do it." And I was like, "Oh, all right." So I was really honored.
Mm.
It's all volunteer position. So it made it easy for me to pour my heart into it
Mm.
because there was love and curiosity and interest in this.
Mm.
I put way more time and energy and love than I
Mm.
would have been able to get compensated for. But it is in paying these dues that helps me be recognized by the community and respected and well regarded, so that when opportunities arise, I am like either top of mind or
Mm.
at least present as if I know what I'm talking about. Still, the
So,
even though VR is still so young,
mm.
I don't know if there's anyone that knows everything about AR and VR.
so
There's
now
too
on
much
a,
happening.
so now on a follow up to that. So if I were to read between the lines, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, this was almost a passion project, side hustle, doing things on, you know, volunteer work, pro bono, helping the community out, wanting to push it forward in a general interest. Is that right? Were you working a full time job in addition to this, or were you making money at this, or how did that overlay?
I was at the time that I was getting into this first VR hackathon. I was actually a full-time student at graduate school. I went to
Mm.
the University of Washington and I ended
Mm.
up getting a Master of Communication in Communities and Networks,
Mm,
perfect tie-in for VR and everything that I'm doing here.
mm,
So I was on financial aid at that point. So it was nice enough for me to be able to have my schoolwork and be able to get that done, and then turn the rest of my energy
mm,
to fulfilling uh, not just my interests, but kind of like where I thought this was going to go. It was worth my time to invest in it,
mm,
and the people. It's all about connecting people, and because that's where it all happens. No matter what business you're in the people business, because there's
mm.
a real person that either signs the check or approves the project or something like that. Until we get AI project managers, which I probably are not very far off, but
Mm,
but until then, we're all in the people business.
mm,
So really, it was something that I wanted to do with my life. It's like what I wanted to spend my heart energy on. So
mm,
that I wasn't making a bunch of money at it right away
mm,
was not a huge detractor to me.
mm,
Plus, the job market is extremely hard. I have had still great friends of mine that are brilliant, brilliant programmers, amazingly intelligent. And one friend of mine was looking for a job for 13 months. He had
mm,
done so many like full day interviews and then tech demo, like, making sure how that happens. And then they would just never call you back. And
mm,
that is really disheartening to developers that are trying to, or anyone who wants to share their best self in doing
mm,
something that they care about, because that's where you get the best win-win.
mm,
But when people don't when they don't see your value, it feels really hard to slog up that road. So
mm,
the good news for me is that I was not so desperate and hungry that I needed to sacrifice on some of my principles to get into VR.
mm,
But as I mentioned before, just being in the community, I was able to see something that I wanted to be a part of. And then more currently for this business, Locosium, is being in the right place at the right time. By being aware of how the space is developing, I knew it was the right time to strike.
mm. So now, I know I think that's certainly insightful and interesting. So now let's take it into kind of having that all in mind, doing VR for several years, doing the different meetups, areas in the groups, working for doing different jobs, getting to Microsoft. How did you make that transition, and how did you get into Microsoft, and then how did you exit out? So how did that kind of play
Sure,
into your
sure.
journey?
So talk about long interview processes. This is also 13 months, right? So I was working at a healthcare software as a service company,
Mm,
and I was doing support work for them, and that was, it paid okay, but it was really, I felt more like an automaton and just clicking the button. Uh, my job mostly could have been automated, and it was
mm,
really frustrating to deal with people that were having issues with the technology. And it was a healthcare app or service. So it was really critically important that it got right. So whenever
mm,
I was on the phone with somebody, they were in a big panicked state. And so it didn't feel good to always be on the receiving end of that. But I love helping people and I love service. So anyway,
mm,
there was AltSpace VR is the social VR platform that was purchased by Microsoft a couple of years back, 2013 or 14, I think, maybe.
mm,
Um, and I responded to a job posting, I think it was on LinkedIn or something. And I had
mm,
an interview with the program owner, and then I didn't hear anything back. But it was too bad. It sounded like it was going to be like a really great gig for me, a good fit.
mm,
But I was just patient. Then all of a sudden, I get a phone or I get an email and from the program owner, and she says, "Drew, I want to schedule a call with you today or tomorrow." And then so we get on the call, and she says, "You work for AltSpace now. Bill us for this call. There's a special project I want you to work with."
mm,
And so I finished my call, and then I got in the car and I drove to the client to help them figure out a way to get their dance club space into VR, and
mm,
as well as show a virtual version of the dance club in the real physical location, and vice versa.
mm,
And we were able to make it work. It was really a great success. It was called V Rhythm, And the group that I was working with is in the Pacific Northwest area in Tukwila, called Virtual Sports. And they got a featured DJ was DJ Illuminati. And she is awesome DJ for one, and really technically proficient. So they're continuing to do their project. So I was working on this on the events team at Microsoft at AltSpace. And then COVID happened. It happened to the world really quickly. So at the beginning of 2020, I was pivoted off of the normal events team, which was my job there was to run a bunch of different community events and kind of see what worked and interview the audiences to kind of like find out what was sticky. What did people like to do? And so I did a whole variety of different things, from like simple games like Guess the Animals, like 20 questions. And I also did a news one where I would take screen grabs from social media on Mondays, and then I would hang a couple of different pictures around that were kind of like conversation topics. So you could walk over to the screen grab and then discuss, what it is that is going on here. It was called Trending Topics Today. So that was a lot of fun, but all of a sudden, people were staying at home. Like don't go out, like lockdown type of orders. And so more and more people were coming into VR, and then businesses are trying to figure out how to pivot their conferences and large events into VR, and AltSpace was there ready. So I got partnered with the most senior events programmer at AltSpace, and then he and I were this 1-2 punch where we handled all of the community partnerships and conferences that were coming to VR. And so we worked on a very small team to try and like figure out how to get these companies to transfer their events into VR. And it was the most fulfilling. Like each project was a new challenge and problem. Everyone had their own different requirements. And when we were able to put these events together and then run the production, it was so energizing and satisfying. It was is my favorite job that I've ever had.
So now, was this still under Microsoft, under their umbrella, or is this something that you started to do on your own?
No. I wondered, since I loved it so much, that if my contract at AltSpace ended, that I might continue to do it for myself. And sure enough, the budget dried up. So at the end of was it June of 2020, my contract ended. And it certainly wasn't personal. There were a bunch of other people that ended up losing their contracts just because the fiscal year prior, they didn't anticipate on all of this need being happening in VR. So I took a well-needed couple-month break. We were really busy. So actually I needed that time to kind of decompress and center myself. But when I started thinking about what I was going to do next, I just kept coming around to how fulfilling and how satisfied I was with bringing people together in VR. And then so I started some exploratory interviews. Probably around October 1st is when I started my first business plan template. And I started filling in some fields and asking around my community, right? So I reached out to centers of influence that I knew that were knowledgeable in the space. And so I workshopped this idea about doing a white glove end-to-end virtual reality production service. And I got a lot of positive feedback, and I got some good recommendations about either what to look out for or how to strategically set myself up for success. And then before long, I was on Discord, actually. I was reading different requests and features on the AltSpace VR Discord. And then somebody posted, they said, I want to do a 200-person event in VR. How do I do that? And so this was in like the middle or end of November. So I'd only been kind of like poking at the idea of starting this business. And I wrote back to him and I said, well, I'm in the process of starting a virtual reality production service. Maybe I'll be able to help. So we scheduled a couple of meetings, and the huge benefit was that this client was very forward thinking, and they had purchased Oculus Quest 2s for everyone in the entire company. So they had this hardware earmarked, it was in their offices. And then they were like, okay, well, how do we use it? How do we get, we have got the technology resolved. Now it's the part in between. How do we get the humans through the technology together in VR, and we were able to help. So their event that they do, this is an annual event called Shenanigans Day, and it's
Mm.
their big company party. And believe it or not, we were able to pull it off more or less as a surprise party in VR too. So they didn't let on to their employees that they're actually going to be doing the Shenanigans Day in VR. So they sent the headsets to people about 2 or 3 days before the event. They got them onboarded. We did a private group for them, and then man, we had a blast. It was a really long day. It was 12 hours overall from end to end, but there were 3 sections that we did VR programming, and they were about 2 hours or an hour and a half for each one of those sections to give time for your headset to charge in between.
So
And it worked out great.
so now taking us to today, so you've made the transition, said, okay, funding dried up, loved what I was doing, but as with a lot of people impacted by COVID, you're having to adjust and pivot a bit. So you start what you're doing today. How has that gone? Where do you see things going? What's kind of the future for it, and what's the projection, or what's the journey ahead?
Oh, so great question. Well, the good news for me is that I got this client just about as soon as I could possibly be ready for it.
Mm.
So I wasn't even anticipating on having this contract yet. I thought that maybe I would get the business started by the end of 2020, but I didn't even imagine that I would have completed my first big company party and client engagement before the middle of December. So that
Mm.
was really a tremendous. It's like things have been moving really fast, and things are continuing to pick up. I'm really excited to do this podcast interview with you. I also was recently featured, and my company Lacosium, for the work that we did for our client in the South Florida Business Journal. One of the staffers who was at our event also happens to be a journalist in VR, and so he wrote a write-up about it. And I'm already starting to get more requests from people that are you could call them competitors that were in kind of like similar spaces, but it's to our benefit, to our mutual benefit, to work together to build up the capacity and resilience for virtual reality events. And I've also got some more requests for people that want to do more events coming forward. So things are going pretty well. I'm actually pretty excited about it, but I'm getting nervous because I've moved so quickly. I was able to do this first event before the website is even fully completed. So actually,
Mm.
now that I don't have a project that is right in the pipeline for me just yet, I'm spending my time focusing more on business development to pick up the pieces that I left, flesh out the website, and really kind of put on a pretty face so that people can see and understand what it is that I do.
No, I think that's definitely sounds like a good trajectory, and things are going well, and looking bright for the future. So, well, as we start to wrap up the podcast, and there's never enough time to dive into all the things that would be fun to chat about. I always have 2 questions at the end, so we'll jump to those now. So, the
Sure.
first question I always ask is: along your journey, what was the worst business decision you ever made, and what did you learn from it?
The worst business decision I ever made was years ago, maybe a decade ago, with the first business that I started. So as I mentioned, I'm an artist, right?
Mm.
So I always was doing paintings in my garage, and then I ended up getting a studio space, and I was kind of doing a lot of work. So I started a business on doing custom artwork for people and doing artwork for homes and businesses. Um, the thing that I learned when that business didn't succeed is that I loved every part of the business that I was doing. I
Mm.
loved the painting. I loved meeting potential clients. I liked hanging the artwork. I liked, showing up at new galleries and presenting my work. But there's only one person who can do my paintings, and that's me. So that business did not succeed because I didn't think through enough. I wasn't confident enough to ask for help and buy services from other people that can do the work just as well as I could. Like I didn't need to be the one who was going out to galleries and
Mm.
presenting my work. I should have had an agent. That would have saved a whole lot of time for me. An agent already has more cachet than just some unknown artist. So that
Mm.
was one of the lessons that rectifying with this business is I am investing in myself, in the business, in the future of the business, where certainly, I'm bootstrapping this thing. I don't have any extra cash, but it is definitely worth my time and energy to hire away different work that, one, either might not be as interesting to me, even if I can do it, or two, if somebody else can do work better than me, even if it's something that I'm interested in, um, I I'm ready to ask for and pay for that type of help as an investment in my business and myself.
No, and I think that that's one where two or a couple traps you a lot of times get into as a startup owner or small businesses. One is, hey, you think you can do everything yourself, so why pay somebody else to do it? And then two is, even if somebody else can do it, I can do it better. It's going to take me longer to train them or do everything else. And so I've always come to the conclusion that, is that if I can find, if I'm, if it's something that I'm really passionate about or enjoy, or just I have a blast at doing it, I'll probably keep it to myself. But if there's everything else, that either yes, I could do it, or somebody else, if I can find somebody that can do it 80% as well as myself, that's typically the time that I need to hand it off, because then it frees you up to be able to do the things that you love and you enjoy, that you are going to be the best at, that you're going to have the most passion for, and then let everybody else kind of fall in around that and let them do the things that they're passionate that they're going to do the best at. So I think that's something's a great lesson to learn. So now as we jump to the second question, which is, if you're talking to someone that's just getting into a startup or small business, what would be the one piece of advice you'd give them?
Um, when you ask for money, you get advice. When you ask for advice, you get money. So the this is practice for me is when I was doing my research interviews, reaching out to centers of influence. I was only asking for advice. I was letting people share with me what their feedback was, and those conversations have led me to other connections. Whereas if I was reaching out to somebody and said, hey, I'm going to be doing this virtual reality event startup, and I want you to either invest in me or give me some money, that really channels how the person that you're talking to thinks about their role in it. So asking for advice lets somebody feel more connected and willing to kind of like support you for a mutual benefit. But asking for money really shoehorns somebody into this transactional type of nature. So I haven't ever asked anyone for money, but when I've asked for advice, it has led to the types of contacts which have led me to money. So
Oh, and I think that's great. And I think that too often you just, I'll just ask everybody for money. But I think, to your point, if you go and ask them for advice, and you're saying, hey, can you provide some input and some feedback? And I'd just love to have your help and your insight and your mentorship. More often than not, they're going to get excited. You'll get a chance to explain your vision, what you're doing. And then that's going to lead, to your point, to that in money, or wanting to be a part of it and wanting to invest and whatnot. So I think that's a great piece of advice for people. Well, as we wrap up, if people want to use your business, they want to hire you for an event, they want to pick your brain about VR, they want to invest in you, they want to partner with you, they want to be your next employee, they want to be your next best friend, any or all of the above, what's the best way to connect up and find out more?
the best way to get a hold of me is through our website. It's locusium.com, LOCUSIUM. We got a contact page there. Just let us know who you are, a little brief message, and I'd love to connect and talk about either how I can help you succeed in business, or help your business transfer its events into virtual reality, or if you just want to talk and see what's on my mind about VR. Like I said before, things are happening new every day, so it's like there's always fresh stuff to talk about.
All right. Well, I definitely encourage people to reach out, find out more, and connect up with you, and appreciate you coming on the podcast and sharing. Now, for all of you that are listeners, if you have your own journey to tell and you'd like to come on the podcast and share it, feel free to go to inventiveguest.com and apply to be on the podcast. If you're a listener, also make sure to, one, click subscribe so you get notifications all of our episodes come out, and two, leave us a review so we can make sure that everybody finds out about the podcast. Last but not least, if you ever need help with patents and trademarks, feel free to reach out to us at Miller IP Law by going to strategymeeting.com. Apologies. And we're definitely here to help. Thank you again, Drew. Now, one other thing that Drew, and we're just getting ready to launch. So Drew is actually the first person that's done it. Is we're doing a bonus question, and the bonus question is going to be the one piece of or one question you've always wanted to ask about intellectual property, whether it's patents, trademarks, or anything. And so Drew has been courteous enough or kind enough to sign up and say that he'd ask that one question. So we're going to wrap up the podcast for here. But if you'd like to hear the bonus question, just continue to listen, and it'll be after our normal episode. So for Kevin, for all the normal listeners, I'm going to sign off. Thank you for being on. Now, for the bonus question, let's dive bonus round. So now, I am an intellectual property. I do Miller IP law. So what is the one question you have about intellectual property, whether there's patents, trademarks, copyrights, or other things that I can answer for you?
Well, it is specifically relating to digital media. YouTube obviously wants to protect their IP and content. And then there's a popularity of restreaming services like Twitch. So my question for you is, when somebody is restreaming copyrighted content, either images, video, or audio onto their Twitch stream, what is their liability?
Yeah, and it's a good question. It's one that I'll give you a partial answer, at least the answer that I know, which is one of the, and is going to shift your question slightly, but I think it overlays, is there's a question that has come up, and I wrote a LinkedIn article about it. You're welcome. I think it's connected still to my LinkedIn profile, but is on, if I were to go out and if I embed, there's a difference between taking someone's content, downloading it and re-uploading it versus embedding or streaming someone's content that you're not the actual source of the content. So if that makes sense. So give you an example. If I were to go to find your favorite YouTube video, and whether, somebody playing a video game, someone, doing whatever it is, if you were to take that content and embed it in your website, generally you're perfectly fine, meaning you don't, even if that content is illegal, meaning somebody else put a movie up on YouTube that they knew that was infringed copyrights, they didn't have the right to, and you are going to embed it and link it to it, so link your website by embedding it, you generally don't incur any liability. And the reason being is because you're not the original source. Now, alternative and interesting, the side note is that with most copyright law, and this would fall under copyright, it starts with the pornography industry. And that's where, if you look at most of the copyright industry, all the interesting cases in law has something to do with the pornography industry, just because they're very aggressive. But it started out with the case law that came as somebody took the idea of, I'm going to go and basically be a platform that aggregates all the best, what they viewed as the best pornography. And I'm not promoting pornography by any means, but they were saying, I'm going to take the best video clips, make a website where you can just find all of those YouTube links and other links and everything else, and you can do it. So they aggregate it, but they embedded it all on their website. So they didn't upload it. They didn't do the original content. And so then they got taken to court. Somebody was saying, well, you can't take all of our content. And the court said, no, if you're embedding it to where you're not the original person that uploaded it, you don't have any of the liability. So that's probably the closest as far as, now you go to Twitch and you go to, streaming content. And if you're going to be somebody else's video game and that, I would extrapolate. Now it is a bit of extrapolation, so I don't know of any court cases or specific to it, but likely it is going to be the same thing. If you're streaming someone else's content, you're live streaming it, you're sharing it, or you're otherwise you're not the original content uploader, but rather just sharing their content, you'll likely be okay. Versus if you were to take their content, download it, upload it onto your site, and now you are the person that originally uploaded it, then you maintain that liability. Does that make sense?
Yep, I understand. Thank you.
So there's our one bonus question. But before we wrap up, any follow-up to that? Any other questions to that, or content, or to that question, or does that make general good sense?
No, that really it makes sense, and obviously the courts look to precedent wherever it happens, and I think that you have actually a very astute observation that lots of developments in intellectual property and even technology have started with porn.
No, I said whether or not that should be the industry that it originates. It's where it falls out. But it's interesting. The last question you didn't ask, but it just as it came to mind, the question you get is now, what about hyperlinks? That's one that I've had a question on. That now, if I hyperlink, that one's typically fine, right? You're just using the URL. You're saying you can go to here, but is there going to be a way that you could hyperlink to content? Now this is written content. Let's say it's a blog post or it's something that's text content, because generally if you go copy and paste someone's content, just stick it on your website, you're going to have a copyright issue. But what I'd always think would be interesting is if you could figure out a way to embed, similar to video content, the other forms of content, whether it's written content or audio content, or in audio you can a lot of times embed, but other forms of content as they're developed, or older forms of content, such that you can apply that same idea to what they found for video. And I don't know of any way that you can embed video or content for on the text side, but it'd be one that'd be interesting, that I think it would be fun to see if somebody can figure out. So with that, there's the bonus question. Thank you, Drew, for participating. That was a fun conversation.
You're welcome. No, yeah, thank you.
Now wish the next leg of your journey in the best as we fully wrap up the podcast.
Right on. Hey, thanks again. This has been a lot of fun, Devin. I can't wait to see in it and sharing it.